Guys, I did a video yesterday on who Anthony Joshua's next opponent would be. And the theme of the video was largely discussing a shortlist that had been discussed by Eddie Hearn in an interview with Sky Sports, where he said he was looking to bring in an American opponent. The names put forward: Bermaine Stiverne, Eric Molina, Dominic Breazeale. Now, if you want to watch that video, it's up on the channel, went up yesterday. I won't repeat my reasons behind it. What I said in very brief was that Breazeale and Molina, disappointing fights for my money. Bermaine Stiverne, by far the pick of the bunch. Now, what I hadn't realised when I posted that video is that the IBF updated top 15 heavyweight rankings came out yesterday, and a number of people commented, various comments on the video that I made about how this would be relevant to the Anthony Joshua fight. And it is very relevant indeed, because in terms of Anthony Joshua picking a top 15 opponent, Joshua's going to have to... in terms of Anthony Joshua picking an opponent for a voluntary defence, it's going to have to be someone from the IBF top 15 heavyweights. So we're actually having to select from the list they've provided. Now, one extremely notable omission from this list is Bermaine Stiverne, who was my pick for the fight, as you guys know. So, it doesn't look like Bermaine Stiverne versus Anthony Joshua is a possibility, which is disappointing, as I thought it was a good matchup. I thought it was the best matchup of the bunch, and I also thought it would be the best learning fight for a guy like Anthony Joshua. So I'm going to look at the top 15. I'm going to talk about my thoughts on the top 15, and we're going to analyse who is a realistic opponent. Now, quite bizarrely, we call it a top 15. Actually, it's a top 13. Numbers 1 and 2 have been left blank. Now, governing bodies don't always have the best reputation amongst the boxing community, and there's some suggestion that if a big money fight is there to be made, they could add someone at will into their top 15. So maybe that's why they've kept number 1 and 2 available. Maybe if Eddie Hearn says, look, there's a big fight with Bermaine Stiverne, you're going to get a big sanctioning fee, maybe we'll see Bermaine Stiverne out of nowhere appear as the number 1 ranked competitor. But at present, they've left number 1 and 2 blank, which I think is very poor. I don't understand why they do that. I don't see any benefit to that or any reason behind it. Surely just move number 3 up to number 1, and so forth, and then add new people to the bottom of the list. So I think that's very frustrating, because instead of a list of 15 proposed opponents, we've now got a list of 13. So anyway, that's one gripe I have with the list, but let's move past that. So I've got a gripe with number 1, I've got a gripe with number 2. I'm not going to stop there, I'm afraid. I've also got a gripe with number 3. Number 3, Erkan Tepe, who will be best known to UK boxing fans for knocking David Price spark out and then failing a steroids test afterwards, which was very, very disappointing. Now, I don't know what the situation with Erkan Tepe is. I haven't got actual facts as to whether he's been banned. What I do know is that it's been widely reported he failed a drugs test following on from that loss to David Price, and he hasn't fought since, to my knowledge. So why he's up at number 3, I don't know. Erkan Tepe did deserve to be there or thereabouts the top 10, based on his form leading into the fight. Having knocked out David Price. But with the recent drug test failure, surely that's enough to remove him from the heavyweight rankings. I mean, I presume he's going to be inactive for quite some time now. So I don't see why he's there on the list. And it's frustrating, because we're looking at an opponent for Anthony Joshua here, a voluntary opponent. And let's not forget, he may have 2 voluntaries before the end of the year. So we may be choosing 2 of the 15 opponents, when actually position 1 is vacant, 2 is vacant, and 3 is not viable, because the guy is presumably banned. So we're now looking at a list of 12 opponents, and we may have to make 2 selections from them, which is really limiting the quality of opposition. Number 4, Carlos Takam, and number 5 is Joseph Parker. Now, as we know, those guys are already scheduled to fight in May, I think on May the 21st, in a scheduled final eliminator for Anthony Joshua's title. So we're going to rule out both of those guys. So number 1, because they're obviously engaged, so not available for a fight. And number 2, because that will be Joshua's mandatory fight, which will be early 2017. So you can see a pattern developing here. We've now done the first 5 of a list of 15, and there's no potential opponents for Joshua's first voluntary. And I'm afraid that continues. Number 6 is Kubrat Pulev, who, as we know, is engaged to fight number 8, Derek Chisora. So neither of those are going to be available for the fight on June 25th. I presume it's going to come around far too quickly for those guys to get over their last fight and fight Anthony Joshua. So that's 1 to 5 ruled out. Vacant, Tepper, Takam, Parker. It's 6 ruled out, Pulev, and it's 8 ruled out, Chisora. Number 7, Vyacheslav Glazkov, presumably is also ruled out because he obviously sustained a very, very bad injury against Charles Martin and won't be ready again for June the 25th. So it actually takes to number 9 in the list before we find an opponent who I can't see an obvious reason that Anthony Joshua would be barred from fighting them, and that's Andy Ruiz. We'll come back to Andy Ruiz in a minute. Number 10 is Charles Martin. Clearly that's not a viable opponent. I don't think too many in the UK will be paying pay-per-view to see the Joshua Martin rematch so quickly. Number 11, Johan De Par. Number 12, David Hay. 13, Brazil. 14, Molina. And 15, Jarrell Miller. So there's no Stiverne, there's no Bryant Jennings, there's no Tony Thompson, there's no Malik Scott. Clearly there's not going to be people like Povetkin and Luis Ortiz, because those guys are, engaged elsewhere. I think Ortiz holds a version of the WBA title. Povetkin is fighting Deontay Wilder for the WBC title. So I don't expect to see names like Ortiz and Povetkin on there. I'm a bit surprised that Malik Scott wasn't on there after his win against Leapai and Tony Thompson. Bryant Jennings, I guess he's had 2 back-to-back defeats, but I'm still surprised he didn't make the list. Tony Thompson, I could see a case for him still being on the list. Bermaine Stiverne, I'm very surprised he didn't make the list, I must say. So, essentially out of what should be 15, we have Ruiz, Hay, Brazil, Molina, Miller and De Par. So 6 potential opponents. Actually, let's remove David Hay, because obviously he's got a fight lined up as well against Arnold the Corn Snake, or Arnold the Cobra, should I say. So actually there's 5 opponents. Ruiz, De Par, Brazil, Molina, Jarrell Miller. Eddie Hearn said he wants an American opponent, which obviously removes Johan De Par. So there's 4 opponents left. And for me, all 4 of the opponents are very, very, very disappointing. Andy Ruiz looked terrible when he fought Sergei Lykovits, made real heavy weather of that. He's become increasingly inactive since, and I just don't know what he's doing with his career. Dominic Brazil, as I said in my video yesterday, for me, I can see why he's marketable. Massive guy, undefeated, Olympian. But let's be honest, he's a one-round job for Joshua. For me, he doesn't have the defence, the technique, or the punch resistance. Eric Molina, credible performance in defeat to Wilder, credible win over Adamek, but not on an elite level for me. Not someone who could realistically come and upset the apple cart. And Jarrell Miller, very interesting prospect. But what on earth has Jarrell Miller done to be in the top 15? In fact, let me rephrase that. What on earth has Jarrell Miller done to be in the top 50? I mean, the guy has beaten nobody of any note. How you could rank a Jarrell Miller above a Bermaine Stiverne, above a Malik Scott, above a Tony Thompson is absolutely beyond me. I mean, Malik Scott, I know he gets a bit of stick, but let's look at the facts here. The guy's coming off wins against Alex Leapai, and he's coming off wins against Tony Thompson. Jarrell Miller has not been near that level of form in the entirety of his career. So for me, those are the obvious opponents, and it looks like out of the 2, you'd have to say Brazil and Eric Molina would be the betting favourites, given the fact that Eddie Hearn's mentioned their names. Of the 2, I guess marginal preference would be for Molina. He's shown durability. He's fought at a higher level. He just beat Adamek. He gave Deontay Wilder some problems, but I just don't see Eric Molina having anything to trouble Anthony Joshua with, really. Eric Molina isn't in my top 30 heavyweights. He wasn't in my top 30 heavyweights when I did the list in January 2016. He may have edged it at the very bottom of that list based on his win over Adamek. But realistically, he is not a top-tier elite heavyweight, and it's a disappointing defence. And fundamentally, Anthony Joshua will not learn anything if he doesn't face an opponent who's going to cause him tests. And it's worrying that he's a world champion who still hasn't been tested in terms of stamina and that sort of thing. So I think these lists are disappointing. It looks like my preferred opponent, Stiverne, is out of the running. and it looks like, based on the list, there isn't actually that much to choose from. Perhaps we are moving in the direction of Anthony Joshua versus Eric Molina. You know, as I said it before in the video, I wanted to cover this topic because maybe I'd given some information that yesterday's video that needed to be updated now that this list's been emerged, so I wanted to put that out there. Yeah, I also just wanted to, I guess, discuss the list. But for me, I think Eric Molina may be the most likely option, unfortunately, which isn't the most mouth-watering of fights, I'm afraid. Anyway, let me know your thoughts on this. Will the IBF change their rules? Will the IBF insert someone completely random in position 1 or position 2 just to get a sanctioning fee and get a big fight for Anthony Joshua? Is that what's going to happen? Will Eddie Hearn actually have to pick an opponent out of the top 15? You know, out of that list I've read out, who's realistic? Who would you choose? Who will be chosen? Let me know your thoughts on this topic. Many thanks for watching, guys. Really appreciate it. If you've enjoyed this video, do hit the thumbs up button. If you're new to the channel, please do subscribe so you can check out some of my other stuff. Many thanks for watching.